chat, yeah. And Chantal, you can just write in the chat like live. Oh, we are live. Okay, we are live. Cool. So let's get started. Hope you were able to get a quick break. Really amazing. It's like I don't know how you're feeling, Jen, but it's like one session after the other. Like you don't want to miss out even on a minute of these talks.
No, so much interesting content. It's just a matter of parsing it. I think Slack too, it's a tool that we're all so familiar with. It's interesting to get like a behind the scenes view of it.
Yeah, so true. So do you want to introduce our next speaker?
I certainly do. So Kat's the design director at Frog and heads up the design practice in the San Francisco studio. She's a passionate teacher of design, serving as a guest faculty for the University of Washington Master of Humans Computer Interaction and Design Department, and led and designed the first UX course for General Assembly. When she's not designing, she moonlights as an improvisational comedian, and really excited to see those skills at work in her talk. So please welcome Kat.
Amazing. Yay. Welcome, Kat.
Welcome. Thanks. Let's see. Let's start this screen share. Get going. Awesome. Thanks for that introduction. I feel like there's a little pressure to be funny, but I don't know if you guys have all been on Zoom. It's pretty hard to be funny on Zoom and kind of live because there's no feedback from the audience. So hopefully Jen and Pri will be laughing. Yeah, I want to talk today about design systems in practice in our organization. As mentioned, I'm a design director at Frog in the San Francisco studio, and I've had the pleasure of working on tons of design systems with clients, everything from taking a design system and building it out and theming it across different brands, to building a design system that is going across mobile and kiosk and a button extension and desktop web, all of those kind of different ways to kind of implement a design system. Feel free to reach out if you want to chat more about this on Twitter. And let's get into the talk we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about how we create, launch, and successfully maintain design systems in our organization. Clearly a huge topic. There's a lot to cover. So what I'm going to try to do today is talk about some of the learnings that I've had, give you some tools that you can use as well, how I think about it, and then capture the slides, and I've put some questions on there that you can dig into and think about later as well. Level set, you're here because you care about design systems, but just as we think about it, there's huge benefits to them: quicker product development, better internal processes, and better user experience when we embed kind of those best practices in the fundamental atoms of our design system. And what is a design system? I know there's been some talks about this and panels around this previously today. When we think about a design system, I think a lot of people come into this mindset that it is sort of the style guide. Maybe it's some of the components built out, maybe those are documented. But when we think about the design system and launching it in our organizations, it's really important that we consider not only just these foundational styles and components that go across different platforms, but we really consider what's the system in which that design language system is living in the larger system. So thinking about the tools, the guidance, the governance, the workflows, everything around making a design language system come out into the market. One of the things that helps me when I think about building design systems is to think about the two audiences. There's the external customer, which our design system, as we build it out, and the design language system impacts those external customers. And there's the service that's provided for our teammates. So I actually like to borrow a concept from service design and think about the design system with this front stage and this backstage. So the front stage is everything that our customer interacts with. So this is everything from how we design a component and how that interaction pattern is, to the visual style. And we need to think about building our design system in a way that meets their needs. And then there's the backstage, which is all the organization, tools, and processes of our design system that really make that front stage come to life and be real. So I think it's important that you think about both of those things as you're building out your design system. And what I want to go over today is the steps to launching a design system in your organization. And we need to think about the external customer and the internal customer. across all these stages. So we're going to talk about analysis, foundation, pilot, and implementation, all getting to launch of our system. So let's start with the first phase, analysis. This phase is all about establishing your goals and setting your team up for success. A quick note on this phase, what teams typically look like when we're launching a design system. When we're establishing a new system or creating a system, it's usually 2 to 4 designers, usually more senior designers, and kind of really spearheading an effort, because there's a lot of ambiguity in this. There's a lot of synthesis of a lot of different touch points, typically, if you're working across a legacy product. And then there's the maintaining. And one just note here is that it's really cool organizations that have a rotating schedule in their maintaining their design systems. So you have product, either people working 50% on product or 50% on design systems, or a rotating 2 or 3 months working on the design system itself. So that way you kind of imbue the design system in your organization more organically than just having one centralized team. There's different models for it. Really important phase is customer research. Any good design process starts with customer research. But I think this is it's really good to bake into your design system, not only just here's components, but what is the user research that we're rallying around as an organization? And also, you're going to be making decisions as you build out your design system for which components to use and when. So recently, we were on a project building out a design system, and during our user research, we found that people were switching when they were about to buy something from mobile to desktop because they trusted it more. And so we started to look at what are the components or what is causing that trust, so that we can bake the trust of the sort of desktop experience into the entire design system. So things like that are really important as you're making decisions in building out your design system. Every good project starts with a kickoff and establishing your goals. But I think what I wanted to share with you on this was an activity that we do that's really fun and also brings a lot of people together, is that we'll audit a lot of different design systems that are out in the world, look at their principles, look at what are some core components that they have, how have they built out their IA of their design language system, and looking at all that, and then auditing that, thought voting, and then talking about how do we want our design system as an organization to look and feel? How do we want it? How do we want the ways that we're working, that we're kind of putting into this system to manifest in the world? So that's a fun activity, brings people together and solicits good conversation. Next piece is choosing your tool set. Tons of great tools out there. And I think when you're building your design system, this is a great time to really think about what tools you're using, because you are thinking not only about the tools that you're designing with or developing with, but also the workflow and the communication. And you can eliminate some of those pain points in your communication or how you're working together by choosing the right tools. Lots of trade-offs here, thinking about the cost to your organization, things that people are already familiar with using. You might be able to get quicker buy-in if you're using things that people are familiar with. But this is just definitely one thing you want to do as you're building out your design system, is look at your tools. And then the last thing in analysis is really thinking about your roadmap and starting to think about what you're going to be building out. So we try to do stuff pretty analog at first. So you'll see in the background on that right side is just a DLS board where we're like, here's what we think the components are, and we're kind of get together of what we think the first components we're going to need to get building are. Here's what we think the foundational structure might look of our design language system, and kind of getting that already started thinking about, because you might have a lot of tech implications to that, or thinking about how does that fit in with our other product roadmap, the design system roadmap. So starting to have those conversations early is always better. Next phase is the foundational phase. This is the fun phase for me. This is when you're getting into the nitty-gritty of design and engineering for building out your design system. So lots of times when you're building out the design system, inevitably, as you're bringing together different platforms or different products, they probably feel a little bit different. They probably look a little bit different. It's the whole point of kind of making this design system. You might have, 10 different button types. You're going to have to do a visual refresh at least. And a lot of people want to do a rebrand with this effort too. Definitely trade-offs there. I think if your goal is to launch a design system and get kind of speed to market faster, it's important that this doesn't go off the rails in a full redesign of like, what does all our photography look like? What are our illustrations? What are all our full new icons? That can like spin out of control and you're not going to get your design system launched. So just realize and help communicate to stakeholders that this is something we're trying to get that sort of MVP out there, and try not to be too far from our current experience so that we can roll this out more iteratively. But we can always update the brand and do this whole rebrand effort after we kind of get the design system in place. So something to think about. And then the next phase is sort of reference designs. And this is kind of going in parallel with the visual refresh. But this is choosing 15 to 20 different screens that are, so we usually do this, we have 15 to 20 screens that have a lot of the components that your wannabe design. So trying to cover like 80% of the components in your system if you can. Looking across different platforms. So you'll see like, you know, let's do the home screen, usually one you might want to take into consideration. Home screen, maybe a detail page, across all the different touch points, and starting to decide how do we need to make this component unique for that. One of the things that inevitably happens in this, people get excited, they love this new experience that you're putting forward, which is great. Build on that momentum, get buy-in. We typically find we get a lot of extra feedback here about things that people want to do that may be much further down in the roadmap than you can build right now. Capture all of that as a backlog. That's super important for product teams that are not in the design system team to be able to kind of build out and build on those requirements. And these designs will then serve as a reference point for them as they actually start to build these experiences and get the market and pull in all of the actual necessary requirements. Next piece is really building those components out. So once you have your reference designs, you're able to look across and start to build the component in the way that you will want to kind of build your system out. So thinking about how you want to nest components in your design file, pooling from foundational files into your groupings of your design file, how you create your design tokens, which is the variable that is the talk between design and eng. So like a color would be a design token variable. And how do you name those so that can all work seamlessly together? How do you build in accessibility so that, for instance, when I call an image file, if there is no alt tag to it, that will call an error. So how do you like really build the fundamental building blocks of your system? Really important in this phase to think about a RACI and establishing a RACI because you're going to be making trade-offs in this. And one of the things that, like on a recent project, we had a component that we built out that was supposed to be two components stacked side by side, and we ended up having to kind of put them to not layer them side by side, just because it was going to take a much longer time on the back end to kind of get that rolled out. So a lot of compromises here, but really, if you build out the components in the way that you want to see them kind of out into the market, you can iterate on this, and this is really important to sort of set that foundation at first. Also super cool, there's a lot of automated stuff in this as well. So like we've been able to go from like a Figma file update of a color all the way out to code when you do that. So yeah, super cool stuff here and how you build that. And then the final kind of piece of the foundational phase is making sure that you're documenting your design system and creating this single source of truth. Most people, documentation makes them want to cry. I get it. But this is also, there's a lot of automation going on here too. So updating things in Figma that can show up in something like Zero Height, or having Storybook integrated in. Being able to look at your documentation in your design file. So there's lots of really cool ways to do this, and really be thinking about also in this phase how your documentation will be updated, who's responsible for that, how do you want to like schedule those release cycles for the documentation. All those things are super important, and the better you do this, the more likely people are able to pick this up and pick up your design system without asking so many questions of you. So it's helpful for you in the end too. Next phase is our pilot phase. This is all about testing your design system and learning. you're not going to get it right the first time. So really important that you're able to test your workflows. How are design engineering working together? You know, like, are we naming everything right? So like, you do your linting? Like, how's everything working? What's going wrong? In a recent pilot, we had trouble kind of onboarding people to our system, and we created these really short 2-minute videos after the pilot so that people could kind of get the system better. And that was like a really quick learning that we had that really improved the success of the pilot and the second phase. And then implementation. So this is all about getting your system out to market. And this is where it gets fun. You want to run a few more pilots, but you want to, I think there's kind of two approaches to getting it to market. So one is to focus on one touch point, like mobile, and like, let's roll out the entire design system in the mobile experience. Another approach here is to look at different platforms like mobile and web, and say if you have a kiosk, and look at what can we roll out on each of these kind of incrementally. So let's say maybe the homepage, we start with that and do that across. Depends really on your technical roadmap, depends on your UX and tech debt, which approach you choose. But super important that you're kind of communicating to your product teams how you're planning on rolling out the design system, when they can expect to start to use the design system, because they're going to be excited to use it. Most likely, hopefully you've done your job throughout the whole process. They've been brought along, and they want to be able to know when can we use it, when can we help build it, maybe. So really important there. And then some final thoughts from me on design systems. Some lessons that I've learned is always be flexible, because there's going to be trade-offs. There's no right way to build a design system. It's never going to be perfect. It's like an asymptotic curve to perfection, and you're not going to get there. Build partnerships across disciplines and across your organization. Establish the right foundation from the start. It's going to be a lot harder if you don't do that. Learn that the hard way. Capture and test your results. Show metrics. You can look at components and how they're being used in your design system. You can see how many components have been broken down and detached from the master component. So just really using metrics to help learn and what's working, what you might need to update. And be outcome driven. Of course, if it's not getting to market, if it's not helping us ship customer experiences, then what's the point? So make sure we're like going toward that outcome. And then always be thinking about how do you treat your design system as a product for your customer, and be thinking about those external users, and as a service for your teammates, be thinking about them the whole time. And with that, I'll say thank you and open up for any questions.
That was awesome, Kat. Thank you so much. That was like a rapid fire, so much useful information. Thank you.
Yeah.
I can start off with a question from Barbara. Can you tell us tips on how to better document a design system? It's a bit broad, but I think that the documentation for design systems is super key. So if you have like top 3 things to keep in mind.
Yeah, I mean, I think so one thing that I think I've learned is like the more succinctly you can document, the better. So being able to kind of create a style that is cascading across your documentation so that multiple people can update it, and being concise in that. We really like to brand our design language system, and that helps too, as a way to get people excited and talking about it. And then I think like the biggest thing is automation. Anything that you can automate and use the tool that you're comfortable with. So like using Sketch or Figma to kind of update automatically into your documentation, and have more editors, I think is helpful.
Oh, thank you so much. I can share the next question. And I'm sharing this just because I love Bart shared like a whole scenario, and you could almost like visualize it. So it's like, let's say you're a designer in a fast-paced, Scrum-driven team building an application. Sprints are short, only 1 week. Work is being pushed fast forward. So you're able to visualize the scene. However, at the same time, you're supposed to build a design system. The system is supposed to be applied to a product your team is building now. The system will also be used for other products, of course, that will be built in the future. So how do you approach that?
Yeah, I have a follow-up question. I'm going to assume that it's a new product. That I'm
Yes,
just gonna,
I think, yeah, that's what he mentioned. Like this,
okay,
the system is to be applied to a product your team is building right now. So
right.
yeah.
So, I mean, that's super tough, right? Because there is a sense that your design system to be systematic will need like a minute to look at the system as you're building it. So I think what I would think about in that scenario is making sure that you're starting to document your system as it's coming out, so that you know what components you're using and what you're starting to use, so that you're not rebuilding things that you shouldn't rebuild and code. And so I would actually like do an audit like every month, or every, take a half a day to look at what you've
Mm,
built and really think about it and see if there are any efficiencies. And then even just take an hour every week to kind of push your stuff into some sort of systematic thinking. There's a lot of already, I mean, people have done a lot of work here, so there's lots of great organization that you can leverage.
right, right. Yep, that makes a lot of sense.
I think on that note, there's another question here from Toshi. What are the top design systems you suggest we
Mm.
study? And do you think there's enough public documentation around those?
That's good. Yeah. I love Salesforce Lightning. I love
Mm.
Polaris, Shopify. Even material design and the Apple documentation is really good. I was just looking at like how do we do this from even a step back of software companies, and how are they doing that from a really global perspective. Salesforce is really interesting because they're creating a design system for people that are creating other systems. So that's also really interesting. So I think those are some really good documentation things. There's a lot of resources. Like I know, like just there's tons of resources out there to look at. Yeah, but I do think that there's not everyone's public, and so like there's some of them that I'm like, oh, I want to dig in more there. Like Airbnb, I want to dig in more. What are you doing?
Right.
That kind of thing.
Yeah, I think we have time for one more question. And that's an interesting one by Fabian. And the question is, motion and copy are often overlooked in not so mature companies when we bring the design system education. So what's your experience around these topics? And I'm assuming, how do you tackle such projects or approaches?
Totally agree that those are kind of overlooked, and yet those are the things that really bring a product to life. Um,
Mm.
we definitely try to put animation into design tokens when anything we're building out. So that's something I feel like as a designer, it feels sort of like malpractice if we're not thinking about motion. And so I think that's something we have to think about. For copy, also the same. Although what's interesting, I feel like, is there's in a lot of product companies, there's product and there's marketing. And so a lot of times the design system is really within the product, and then marketing is kind of like, well, we own copy. So like it's an extra layer of getting the organization on board when you bring in copy to that design system.
Yeah. Yeah, that comment of yours just brought me flashbacks from one of the past places I worked at,
Yeah.
where the product would build the entire thing, and marketing still in some organizations, they own brand, but it's like,
Right.
no, it's a tech company. The product is a big part of the brand. And
Right.
then, yeah, there was always like this headbutting.
That's
But
right.
yeah, that's very true. I think a lot of us are still trying to figure out that line.
Yeah, you're not. I mean, you're not alone to be in that. So.
Yeah, yeah. Cool. Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Kat.
Yeah.
That was really amazing. As Jen said, in a short amount of time, got to learn a lot. So thank you so much for that. It was a really
Great.
informative session.
Thank you all.
Really, really glad to host you. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank
Thanks for
you.
having me. Appreciate it.
Cool. So that was amazing. So, Jen, we take another 5-minute break, and then we are back with, last but not the least, talk of the day. Really amazing speaker, Gina, and we don't even have to explain the topic she'll be speaking on. I think all of us would be aware of that. So we will be back again, for EST folks at 5:40, for everyone else in 5 minutes. Yeah.
See ya.
See you.